I can't see you all coming in, but I'm just imagining a very full room. Just lots of happy faces. Nothing went wrong today.
All right. Well, good morning and welcome to Maestro Entrepreneur Center's 2021 webinar series. We're really excited for today's presentation and to kick it off with Miss Melissa Vela-Williamson of MVW Communications. I'm very excited for what she's going to talk to us about, and I'm excited that you are here joining us today. And with that, I will go ahead and hand it over to Melissa.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you all so much for being here, making time to talk about this and to meet with me today. I'm very excited to host you all and have this really important conversation because I don't think any of us imagined what 2020 was going to be like, and 2021 to try to plan and imagine around that has been a little challenging as well, let's say. So, today's talk is all about that. We're going to get into communication strategies that will help you think through, navigate around, and kind of baby step and crawl under if you need to. The turbulent, bumpy times that all of us can imagine we will see in 2021. I think our January probably gave us a good, level setting and baseline to predict around as communicators and business owners. So everything's still looking good, Leslie? Just want to make sure. Thumbs up. Wonderful. Well, thank you all for having me again. My name is Melissa Vela-Williamson. I call myself a chief communication architect of my own firm, MVW Communications. And why I call myself an architect is because I have an expertise and accreditation in public relations. That is my love and background. I think people first. I think heartwarming, helping others, social good, all of that. So I come to every communication challenge with that framework and point of view. But like an architect, I put together the best parts and tools around communication to develop any kind of strategic communication plan, solution, creative thought, or an answer to a problem, right? So I plan and collaborate with my clients and colleagues to come up with our solutions and our approaches. And in some cases, I build the plan and I give it over to a team who's ready to bring it to life. And in a lot of cases, I stay on to bring that special project initiative, always meant to do that kind of effort to life as well. I've been in the business for over 16 years, really across in house, small boutique Hispanic agencies, as well as I was in house at Big Brothers Big Sisters in traditional employment, doing recruiting, volunteer management, public relations, marketing, all types of communication there. I worked as well at HEB's corporate office in diversity and inclusion for about 4 years and almost 2 in their corporate communication and culture department. So, internal, how we talk to and love on our employees and communicate with the diversity within, as well as how do we talk to our audiences, customers, stakeholders outside of the organization. And then my last traditional employment job was at KGB Texas here in San Antonio, our largest public relations and marketing firm. And then I've been out on my own for the last 5 years and just loving it. I love the diversity of clients. I love bringing resources to needs and connecting across our community. And now I have the opportunity in 2021 to be a columnist at the national level for the Public Relations Society of America, where it's more thought leadership expression of where we're going with public relations, marketing, advertising, and social, with a special focus on the Hispanic, Latino communities, what that market's like, how our networks are built, and what other pros should know right from there. But the services run the gamut just because my interests do, and the communication needs are many and keep evolving and growing. And I'm also very involved in the community, share a lot of pro bono advising, found, communication committees for Girl Scouts, as well as the Ronald McDonald House charities. I even volunteer with my dog Bevo. He's a trained volunteer pet therapy animal, and that's a ton of fun. But I'll bring that back into our presentation today as part of your strategy as well. But I just want to show you that I actually walk that talk and don't just recommend that people get involved in their community and help out. Wonderful. So as we go through, everyone, you have questions, you can put them in the Facebook Live chat. I know the team will be looking at that. And then Leslie as well within the webinar, put your questions in there. It does not bother me at all for you to say hello, give me a shout out, ask me something that comes up throughout the presentation. I'm happy to keep it as interactive as possible. So let's kind of set the stage, right? We all just went through 2020, that historic calendar year. I think the best term for it was uncertain. I love that it was a novel coronavirus because novel was the word, right? Everything was so unusual about what we experienced. But there's some really important lessons that we can learn from that. First, I want to say from 2020, I want to remain, and you should remain both as a leader, a communicator, a business owner, whatever standpoint you're in, even just as a mom or dad, a parent, a brother, sister. We need to really look at the silver linings that came from the pandemic in 2020, its unusual nature, to kind of help power us through what we're facing right now and what we'll probably face throughout 2021. Now, I want to say I don't have a crystal ball. No one gave me that kind of, advantage. But there's a lot that I've done in my career that helps me kind of forecast what's coming based on the patterns I see. And so I do feel confident that I have enough experience and expertise in doing so that can kind of transfer here, as well as just being wildly curious and reading everything I can get my hands on and taking it all in. But silver linings are going to really be important for us to remain, keep our mojo up enough to get through this, right? So what were some of them? Well, I think for us, and I know me personally, a silver lining was really figuring out and having that forced time to identify what is most important. What's the most valuable parts of life? What's the most valuable parts of our careers, of the businesses or organizations that we run and operate, right? This is a picture of, and I'll get my little pointer here. This is my swing set in the backyard. And I'll tell you what, even my outdoor swing had a tough year in 2020. Like every appliance in my home broke down for whatever reason. Like it was just the year. But there was a lot to be learned, right? And so first and foremost, like the health, we learned how vitally important, if you're healthy before, maintaining that health was a big focus over the year, right? Of course, the ramifications and losses around COVID were incredible. And my heart goes out to everyone who's affected with that. As businesses or organizations, whether you're for profit or nonprofit, the ability to be agile and nimble and move with the changes and the rolling deadlines and timelines and restrictions opening and closing, being able to have lower overhead and not a lot of cost to operate was very helpful. And that was kind of a good lesson. People who had thought about their own personal finance and debt realized how helpful it would be if they were debt free, because if they lost their income, they'd be able to, maintain their lifestyle a little bit easier through that bump, right? But businesses as well, right? We all kind of evaluated the offices. I'll tell you, I've been had my own home office for 5 years since I've been full-time with MVW. And it seemed a little counterculture or like forward thinking then. And now it's pretty understandable by a lot of people, right? The time that we save and whatnot. But that became a silver lining, is that it opened up that idea of, working remotely for those who could or should or have that kind of personality for it as well, right? And what can you save there in time and money? The cool-headed, inspiring leaders, those was something encouraging to say, really, really shined. And if you weren't that kind of leader, if you could bring that out in 2021, try to develop that, that's really, really going to be, valued by those around you and those who are encouraged by you. On the other side, right, we saw those who kind of lost their heads a little bit, and those will always make media stories that will always get viral in the wrong way. So we just want to keep that in mind, is do what you need to in terms of self-care. Manage up if you need to remind those on your leadership team to take care of themselves and get their rest, and work will be better when we all feel a little bit better, right? That's still going to be super important this year, just to make the right decisions. The value of a connected community, the value of clear communication that was timely, that was helpful, that gave us, accurate phone numbers and steps forward, was more important than ever and still will be. And the ability to monitor what's happening. What does that news story mean? What are the dotted, lines I can connect from that article or from what the CDC has to say, right? All that became very important. And then overall, like, just perseverance, just trying again and starting where you are and getting back up and getting back up, because we truly don't fail unless we just give up. And so this was a year where we saw that perseverance of that. I always call public relations a long game, and I think of myself sometimes as the little tortoise who could, like, step by step, I'm gonna get there. Not every day is quick and fast, but I also don't kind of burn out or flame out. And so that's something that you want to think about with your communication strategy in your work. Like, well, that may not be viral, it may not be trendy, but it won't also flame out, right? Which is important. You want to be in this for the long haul. And so, how, knowing all that and thinking behind, if we think ahead, so how do we put our mind around 2021? Well, what I've been telling everyone is to consider this is really a rehab year, right? If we can level set and understand that this is going to be a year of restoration, that pandemic was like nothing else that most of us alive can ever remember. The multiple places and people that it touched, is nothing that we can even really compare to anymore. We all know that vaccines are rolling out, but distribution is just challenging. There's a lot of emotions and feelings around that as well. The pivoting, I mean, some people pivoted so much they were like ballerinas and then they're about to fall off the stage because it was just too much overall. But it's just going to continue. And that agility and reimagining and tweaking and debriefing and evaluating and getting input, super important, right? Work with your community to develop the year ahead. And then again, embracing those silver linings. This is a photo that I took just this weekend. Every year I set my one word intention instead of a resolution, right? Because resolutions get thrown out by February for most people. It's like, well, what is my theme for the year? And every year I kind of declare a theme. In 2020, my theme was finish because I had a certification. I really wanted to just finish. And thank goodness for that, because there was not only that certification, but there were so many, projects and campaigns and, gosh, even just like home, issues that if I just thought about the word finish, it helped me just get through, power through that challenge. And so for 2021, my one word for the year is restore. And there's actually an organization that has this little tool set where you stamp out your one word intention, and it can be like a team building thing. So it's pretty cool. It's called My Intent. But even like pounding in that word restore, like, it wasn't perfect. Even my S is messed up, right? But we have to kind of accept the best of what we have and just keep moving forward. So, what does that mean? So, a top tip is really for any organization, whether you're a nonprofit, small business, big, large corporation, you're still going to want to think about 2020 and what that meant, and like then juxtapose it to 2021. So, that means we did virtual in 2020, right? We were forced for a lot of us to just embrace the virtual and do it. It wasn't always pretty. In 2021, it's really time to be a little more creative. So, how do we build on that? I don't think that Zooms and virtual expressions of conferences or workshops are going to go away, but think of this as an addition or multiplication strategy. So, people are tired. COVID fatigue is real. Put in the comments if you're just tired of Zooms, because, hey, I'm here with you. I love you all, but, I get tired of Zooms too. But you want to think about, so if people are so tired, they're emotionally, a little behind, and they need a little more in person. Like, we're missing all the dopamine and feel good, serotonin that we share when I have coffee with you in person. Like, how do we make our experiences a little more hybrid? that's work, right? So some of us are coming in part-time into the office, and a couple days a week just to kind of rotate people out and keep the footprint small. But that's just that one in-person day. You probably get so much done, right? But then, there's value of being, offline and working from your home or remote office as well. For a lot of those who do events, event marketing, event planning, they went virtual, and some of them is like, here's our event, it's online, watch it, and that's it. But the hybrid expression of how can I kind of play at home with you and feel like maybe I'm a little bit there is going to do nothing but expand. PRSA, which at the local level, I'm very involved with the Public Relations Society of America. So our trade association, our banquet's like big, and we usually get in person, and we're all dolled up. Well, that couldn't happen. So they had a hybrid option where we did have an online experience, but they sent award winners, the boxes at home. So if you felt like if you'd put forth the effort to put in your case study and pay the fee for that award, and you wanted the recognition of the hard work you'd done from the year before, like this was a nice way to feel a part of it. So I encourage you all to think about, we have something coming up, even for your employees, like how do we make it feel a little more hybrid so they feel emotionally just a little more connected, right? A little more heart gets you. And then also staying nimble and responsive and noticing, hey, I think this is going to be coming up, so maybe we should adjust for it ahead of time. I do always advocate for any communicator, whether you're more in the marketing house, PR house, or you're the one woman or one man shop, one person shop that does it all. You're going to want to be connected across departments of what's going on, because so often your service departments, your program managers, those close to the products, will have great ideas that will help you kind of shape the way forward as well. And then for nonprofits or those who have asks out there, even for a small business owner like myself, like we have to accept, at least in 2021, that there's going to be some sense of doing, of course, more with less, but that also means money, right? So micro giving, asking for a small dollar amount, like even just $5, and tying it to that $5 will enable us to, feed one person, right? Feed two people. That will enable us to turn on the lights for 1 week. Give them something tangible to tie to, so they can understand why during such a rough time they should and could spare a dollar to help someone else. And as well as receiving as well, just keep changing that strategy a little bit to meet our reality of today. So with all this virtual and hybrid and our COVID concerns, of course, one question keeps kind of coming up, at least in the nonprofit sector, but believe me, it's definitely in the for-profit. You really can't replace some parts of the human element, right? There are hands-on help that is just needed. There's only so much that can be done virtually. There's only so much data entry anyone needs, right? Most nonprofits of any size are going to need humans to touch and do something at some point. And in such a crazy, chaotic time, and I will say that, in the best of terms, it's turbulent right now, but it's still a little bit chaotic because there's so much change. Just doubling down on your mission and your visions and your values will help ground you. While everything else is crazy and spinning around you, you're like, I know who I am, I know who we are, and this is what we do. And here's how we can do it today, right? And we'll worry about tomorrow as we get there, as far as ahead. I'll tell people to plan ahead, if you have to, day by day, week by week, right? But always think ahead. But why you exist, who you serve, and how others can engage with you should be crystal clear. And if you keep having to modify that, then you just keep communicating the changes and why, who, how every day, right? But again, in-person help still needed. Most of you who are close to me know that Meals on Wheels is a client, and I have been, beside them while they're in the trenches, and my heart goes out to them. They've been working so very hard throughout the pandemic, but we have been a great crisis response team and dealing with every new issues. But at the end of the day, they could not do their services all virtual, and they still need volunteers, and most organizations really do. But what's really important is that you illustrate, well, how does that work now? Because if we used old stock photos to rally volunteers in the community when we had the surges in the summer, volunteers not, right away I could go, well, if the numbers are going up, we're probably going to lose volunteers because the volunteers tend to be a little bit older in age or retiree, or they're working at corporations that are no longer able to distribute like they did before. This might happen. So we kind of geared up with the volunteer messaging, but we could not illustrate how you could be more COVID safe or it was COVID friendly if we used old photos or stock photos, right? So even if they're not beautifully perfect and wonderfully lit, show us what you're talking about. Like, show me a photo, show me a video, show me a little scrappy webinar piece, something that helps me understand and what you're asking and how this could work. Because all new ideas, it's best to illustrate that. And then, of course, always communicate that respect that you have for people, for safety, for public health, and what's happening. Leslie, I see some activity in the chat. Are we okay, or is there any questions?
There are no questions, but
Okay.
there are a lot of words, powerful words for 2021 that people are embracing and really using as their theme.
I
So,
love it. You know what? I'm not great at my stamper, but we could do a little raffle if you want to take a couple names by the end, or if someone asks some questions, maybe I'll mail you a resourceful little My Intent bracelet. It's not wonderful, but hey, it's good. Okay. So, what are our strategies now that we know, okay, 2020, 2021's probably maybe like this. So, how do we communicate it with all those challenges, Melissa, right? That's the big question. Well, again, like I've just done, right? We're going to look a little bit backwards to be able to move forwards. And this is going to be a little more of a two-step than I think we're used to, but that's okay. We can move, right? We can do it. It's not a problem. But I'll say, you're just going to want to plan with a pencil, y'all. Okay. Like, don't get. Don't get in love with your planner and write it in pen or just document things and be heartbroken that the plan fell apart, because the most nimble, agile way you can do is say, okay, here's what we know today. Maybe you plan a month at a time. You look at your dreams for the next quarter, right? But imagining the total year is going to be a little tricky for most. Do analyze, well, what was that COVID impact to us, or what was that 2020 impact? Whether it was negative or positive, you want to work from there, because there could be some learnings from the loss. Like, I work with a lot of education clients, and I have my own children who are school age and they're younger, and really assessing, okay, what was that impact on education? Dot, dot, dot. What is the COVID learning loss? And then how do we start fixing that or working ahead? We can't wait a whole year to address some of these challenges, right? So, even if you're just planting little seeds, they will sprout, but you have to get started. So, that's really important. If you weren't as resilient as you hope to be as a person or as an organization, then figure out, what do we need to do to fix that and be a little more resilient through this year? Because y'all, I still want to say it's just not going to be super smooth, right? Um, and then diversify, right? Diversity is like the strength of everything. I mean, we talk about that in terms of, diversity, equity, and inclusion, but even in like how we make money or how we communicate, right? Or how we take care of ourselves needs to be important, because it's all going to keep changing. So how you operate as an organization, totally virtually, well, okay, can we add some in-person experiences? What's the safest way to do that? When and how? And how do we test that, right? Income streams, how you make money. Like, even I am thinking through the services I provide, how scalable is that? If something happened to me, if I got sick, who could, continue the work? And everyone has to think like that, right? The communication channels, there's always going to be new emerging cool trendy little social channels. I know right now I'm playing on Clubhouse, which is an audio only like app. That's pretty neat. But it does, even if that app was to kind of flame out, what's important to know and think about is, this is emerging. This seems to be getting popular. Maybe we don't put everything in that, but let me observe it and monitor and play with it, because maybe audio only is going to become a new huge trend. So a lot of us are into podcasts. A lot of us are thinking and starting podcasts, but this is a new format. So there's value to that, right? So again, it's that plus multiplication, diversify, think through how you communicate, and always where your audience members are. There's no point in being all over Snapchat if your audience is not on Snapchat, for example, right? So make your effort worth it. The types of customers you serve, how you serve them. right? The team members, the type of team members, where they're even physically, located. So many of us realize, gosh, we can hire talent from across the world, even, right? But at least across Texas, at least, a smart brain is transferable just about anywhere, depending on the industry and your skill set. We cannot learn enough as communicators, and everyone who's basically, um, able to talk is responsible for some level of communication. We can always get better in writing. We can always get better with our tools. Just keep working on yourselves to make things better and encourage your teams as well. This is a great image I shot of a really nice person, um, from the board couple. And one of the hybrid experiences I was a part of last year was leadership. SAISD had their graduation program. And so instead of our normal event, they said, hey, we're going to do it online, of course. And they had these great breakout rooms. That was fantastic. But they're like, you can go pick up your award swag and gear over at the board couple. They had just, I think, started business, and they make those, oh gosh, I always say it wrong, but like Lunchable for adults. Like, just, I can't even say it, Leslie. Charcuterie.
Charcuterie board. I
There you go.
finally learned. It took me forever, but
Yeah, Melissa's Lunchables, like the cheese, right? The ham, the turkey, the crackers. I love it all. But all that to say is, if we go, we pick it up. We came, or you like, have that. There's people had champagne. It was so fun. But that just gave us all the warm fuzzies, right? Versus us just being at home buying our own stuff, like that little stuff. But for this business, they had opportunity to build a curbside kind of model, partner with organizations. What do you need? What events do you have coming? Can we cater curbside for you? A lot of ways to diversify when you think through that. Every time I play with my little pin, then I lose my.
yes, and actually the board couple incubated at Maestro and until they got their own space. So they're
And then
one.
yeah, and then they're like living it up over there with balloons. I love it. It's great. Another strategy is community relations is a big part of good organization strategy, right? Some people don't think of it when they build their communication plans, but really, how are you communicating? Well, so much of what we do is non-verbally. So much of what we do are our actions. So it's always actions first and then the words, right? Then we talk about how much we care. So first of all, those who are really putting it out, at the individual level or organizational, like they're showing that they care, they're donating their funds or donating their time, they're getting innovative. That is what's going to build those long-term relationships and the brand loyalty that we all talk about, right? No amount of advertising is going to make anyone believe something that you're not doing. So help as much as possible this year. Give your time. There's always some time you can spare, even if it's a quick 20-minute, phone call with a student or, another colleague who's struggling. I had my, what I call my COVID response team, where I would, oh my gosh, Leslie, I can't, just tell me to keep going because it's getting really hard today, right? We had little phrases, that we'd like cheer each other up with, or kind of, tough love each other, like, come on, get it together. And we would move forward. But professionally, there's boards, there's committees. They still really need help. I advise all my clients and my professional friends and colleagues, like, don't, if you can fulfill your commitment, fulfill your commitments. There's never going to be a better time. I think we all learned how precious time was, right? But this is a great time to show people that you're accountable, that you're trustworthy, that you are authentically like genuine and human, right? And that you do care. That's a silver lining too, is that this pandemic really humanized a lot of us, and we kind of shared experiences we hadn't before, in a while. Your talent, of course, right? Whether you're teaching something, sharing a presentation, advising, even just cross promoting, because you have a big organization or following or brand, and that, if you share that person's donation request, or you share information about where to get vaccines or something, that's going to have a better reach. That's so helpful too. And then, of course, treasures, right? Even the smallest gifts, a lot of small gifts can make a huge impact. In-kind donations, even things that you may feel like, I don't know if this has value. ask around. There's plenty of people who know somebody who could use that yarn, right? Or use that string or use those pencils or whatever. And think novelty as well. I would think about, everyone thinks about, for example, giving away supplies, school supplies at the start of the school year. And I tell clients, do it in January because all those kids have beat up their backpacks, right? The pencils are missing somehow, even during the pandemic, and we're using all those screens. I see schools needing things. So, you just think about the timing, that'd be helpful. But just share, how you're helping in a way that inspires others. If you have to do your own marketing, like I do, it's pretty uncomfortable, right? But I just like show people. I mean, look at me there. I don't look great. I'm like a little, wannabe elf. And I just realized I was like, "Ugh, I should be wearing like a Christmas or a holiday mask. Like, come on, PR Pro, right? But I was there with my little therapy dog, and we volunteer for the Ronald McDonald House Charities. And they had their first hybrid event for families. So their families have not been able to be in the homes throughout most of this pandemic because of how fragile the medical challenges they have are. So, it's not always like super glamorous, but hey, I was out there in the cold and, no one can say I don't try. That's right. So, communicate also with compassion. We do have a initiative and a group here in town, and San Antonio is named one of several hundred only around the world compassionate cities. And I had a chance to talk with Reverend Helmke, who's over Compassionate San Antonio, about communicating with compassion. And the first step, and it sounds so rudimentary and like simple, but it's to listen to people. And how often do we make our plans and our, advertising campaigns and our posts and our programs, and we give it to people instead of like working with them to get their insights, their vantage points, their diverse, mindsets on that. So listening more and listening more to where it's like, golly, okay. That is when you're like, okay, I'm really communicating with that person and not to that person. And therefore, their best ideas or my blind spots are all on the table, right? We can all learn from that. But that's also part of meeting people where they are. I have this picture of the kids in my neighborhood at Halloween, and these are some of my neighbors. And there was messages I saw. I won't name any names, like but there was different messages from different people and friends in my network and organizations that they're just like, no Halloween, no Halloween, y'all. Okay, sorry, kids, next year. Okay, well, I mean, if you know kids or if you have kids, like that's a really hard message to sell to them. And of course there's extreme situations and honor, right? Meet people where you are. If like that's your reality, that whatever, fine. But you can usually find a new way to do something. And these kids in my neighborhood found that way to give the candy down, the little pole. Now their dad's super inventive, I'll tell you. We call him Mr. Charlie. He's always tinkering with something. But, shooting the candies down the chutes, and that made great media, right? And that made great social content. That made, it was a fun experiment. And those kids will probably never forget the time they made the Halloween candy shoot, right? Or got candy that way. So there's always kind of a way to think about how can we make this a little safer, COVID friendly, um, but still, have that emotional connection with each other, get those different viewpoints, and then test, right? Test your copy and visuals. Like even before I post a photo, I'm like, is there anything I see in here? That photo even could have like um the card, oh my gosh, the license plate on the back, right? I mean, does something seem insensitive? Is someone's mask down? Like you just want to test, hey, how does this always have a second set of eyes of everything you do when as a communicator? Because especially this year, that we want to check for everything possible that we don't intend to cause problems for us. Keeping our stakeholders informed. So talking about listening, I mean, you actually want to engage with them, right? So that's a very key strategy. And what I tell you people forget often is you want to start with those closest to you and then work your way out, which for most organizations, they have some kind of employee base, whether that's you as a solopreneur and you have some contractors you work with or partner agencies or whatever that is, or you have, traditional employees. That manager, supervisor to employee relationship, research has said that that is the most important, influential relationship in your organization. If the CEO and top down message didn't get to those managers or supervisors, and those individuals didn't understand and perceive it in the same way, then how they communicate, that is where everything goes well or falls apart. And a lot of times when we make decisions in a hurry, and especially with all this chaos and turbulence, right? We're like, just do the thing and hurry. Fine. But if we don't share that information, at least to that top line supervisor or that top line influencer in your organization, and they all have, I would do everything in writing as much as possible, right? That same kind of consistent message to share, it will fall apart. Forget your customers, right? Because if I say something one way and say this is what it is, and I don't tell Leslie, and Leslie answers our social media, sorry, Leslie, you're my friend on this one, right? It's not going to be the same message. So you just think key stakeholders are those closest to the problem, closest to the issue, or the most, informed and subject matter experts that we have, which usually starts with your internal audiences first, your employees, and then your actual like customers and clients, the volunteers that help you do what you do, the donors that empower that, the board members that help advise. Media, people want to think about media right away, but not everything is appropriate for them, right? In terms of, does it have a universal citywide consequence? For example, we'll talk about that in a minute. And then, of course, influencers. And when I say influencers, I don't just mean social media or like celebrity influencers. We all know, when someone says something about a topic, they can have a lot of impact on the perception of that. And that really runs the gamut on whether someone's an influencer politically, around public health, in the industry, because they're the best chef. And so when they say that your food's good, boom, right? You're going to get all the attention. Think about who influencers and who are influential to your business, your organization, your industry, and your well-being, and keep them informed, as you can. For communicators, I definitely want to point out, this is kind of a little bit of advanced for a lot of folks. Now, we want to think about communication, especially if some of my friends from PR world are here. We want to think about the PESO model. So PESO stands for paid, earned, shared, and owned. And really, what that means is that we, as a communicator, you don't want to put all your eggs in that one basket, right? You don't want to say, well, we're gonna work with media, and the journalists are gonna cover this, and that's how we'll get the word out. And then all the sales are coming from that, right? Or all the volunteers will come from that. Because guess what? They may not be interested in your story, or they may have other pressing news to cover, or the timing of that may not be the timing of your anniversary, for example, right? So you definitely want to think through. So, what are the paid, vehicles that we need to use for this, right? What advertising needs to happen around this, even if you have low budget, even social media ads. Like if you think, and socials in the shared bucket, right? We don't own Facebook, even though we have our company page on Facebook, for example. They change the algorithm. They can change whatever they want. They are definitely working to monetize that platform, as we've seen. So right now, maybe 1 to maximum like 3% see an unpaid, organic, natural post you just put out there. So it's really, really tough when, as a communicator, you're like sweating that content and sweating that visual and making it beautiful and perfect. And like no one's liked it because they literally don't see it unless you put some dollars behind that Facebook post, right? And make it a paid strategy. But you always definitely want to take care of all of your own channels. And that means I own that property. I completely control the success, of that, and all the content that's on there. So like your website, right? So often we're like keeping Facebook and Twitter and all that up to date, and our Facebook's behind, or we don't mention the event on our Facebook, for example, right? Well, you own that property, you should take care of that first. So embrace that. In a more simplified approach, this is kind of how I communicate, or when I'm like building a plan, I talk to clients about, like if we had, for example, we were launching a new brand, or it was anniversary, or we have some kind of important story to send out. Like, well, what does that look like? If it's an anniversary, like, do we need to change your brand? Have we talked about it on your website? Do all your stakeholders, your employees, everyone know that's going on, right? What is media like? What are the newsworthy angles around that story idea? What's happening in social? Have we bothered to mention and put it in our content calendar? Do we have a content calendar in social, right? Community relations, like, is there some kind of expression we can do to help others on that same story idea, theme line, right? So I really go 360 around a communication challenge, but also think about this, what we call in the industry like an integrated approach, this peso model integration. All the parts of the communication wheel are going in the same direction. Now, I get asked this a lot, so I went ahead and threw this in for y'all. Because media relations definitely is something that I love to do. I love working with journalists. Like they're my BFFs. They're the peanut butter to my jelly. But it's because I, don't cry wolf with them and I don't ring their bell and try not to bother them unless I really feel like something is newsworthy. So I will tell you the criteria that most journalists adhere to in determining, okay, is this a newsworthy idea, right? Should this be a story? So timely, if something just happened or is just about to happen, if it makes sense, like don't pitch them a Valentine's Day story, in October, right? That is not timely, right? Anything around the COVID vaccines, obviously, right now, a new intervention, new way to roll out something, right? That would be super timely, for example, right? But don't wait too long trying to make a press release perfect and let that timeliness window close on you. So that's a big tip for mine. Proximity, where it happened is going to be a big deal, right? Something happens, I don't know, in Albuquerque and has no ramifications. There's no relationship to San Antonio, or San Antonio, news coverage probably won't cover it unless it has one of these other little criteria. So, like, if it's really weird and novel, maybe that's when we see those, like, why is there something from Albuquerque here? Oh, because that was a really weird story of a cat who had the unicorn head or whatever. I saw that about the little puppy that had the unicorn tail. Poor dog. But that's a great example, right? And we remember those stories. So we'll get into that. Prominence, that is someone of big influence, or comes by, gets involved, does something good, does something bad, right? We're going to hear about it. Oprah shows up. She just walked into my room right now. Like, I could call the media, like, hey, Oprah's here, got on my webinar, we're hanging out. They'll probably be curious about that, right? And want to see what's she doing in San Antonio. There hits the proximity. She's here to get her vaccine. Oh my God, how timely is that, right? The more criteria that ranks up against your story idea, the more likely it is to be of interest, right? Conflict, we see a lot of conflict stories, the two sides of an issue. If you're having a challenge, we've all seen kind of the investigators looking into something. So when there's an issue, looking at that is usually explored. And so keeping an eye on that too with your organizations would be helpful. Is like, is this something that you sometimes proactively want to take a stand on something because it's the right thing to do? That would hit the conflict criteria. Human interest is a category I love. That is like unsung heroes category. That is something like heartwarming that makes you feel inspired or empowered. Something extraordinary about an ordinary person usually falls into that. And there are certain reporters that actually kind of focus on human interest stories. Those tend to be the long feature. There's a great one in the front page of the Express News today about the woman from Corpus Christi who crocheted the little Bernie doll that went off, I think on eBay, it went for like over $20,000. And she's giving the proceeds to Meals on Wheels. Like, that is so cute, right? You're going to want the photo of the Bernie. You're going to want to see the lady. You're going to want to hear human interest all day long, right? Consequence, that is when something, the more people involved in something, the bigger of a consequence it has. So when they shut down a highway, like 281 shut down, 1604 all the way around San Antonio shut down, we're going to hear about that for sure, right? Obviously, COVID-19 became a much larger and larger and larger consequence. And so now it's, front and center. We hear about that a lot. Sometimes organizations want to pitch a story and they're like, we should, tell the media. I'm like, well, then really that impacts like 4 people, right? That's not a huge consequence. And if it doesn't hit any of the other criteria, you can pretty say like, maybe we should do something on social about that. Maybe we should really blow that out on a blog, on our website, things that you own, or pay, for some advertisement of it, right? But I would hold your pitches to media pretty precious and wait till you hit some of these things. Is it useful? Free vaccines, free like job banks, things that are free, are is a pretty good criteria. If it's open to a lot of people, then it's, consequential as well. Yeah, but definitely job banks, you'll always see like job fairs. But even free, like when Dairy Queen has free ice creams, right? Well, that's kind of useful and fun. The novelty is big. So, our brains are wired to unfortunately remember things that could affect us negatively and hurt us. So, we're always going to remember things in that deviance category, things that are bad and scandalous, that definitely makes news. But in novelty can go positive ways too. Just like the little Bernie meme that went crazy and something that everyone's talking about that's weird and interesting, can hit that category. Or first evers, especially if it's doing good for others, is big. And then, of course, like I said, deviant scandals. So if something's going wrong in your organization, I always say put out the tiny fires. Say the hard thing, do the hard thing before it becomes a big issue, and has a lot of consequence, hurts a lot of people, and becomes big news for the wrong reasons. Still good, Leslie? Any questions?
Still good, no questions. If you have questions, please put them in the chat and we'll talk about them.
Absolutely, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, so planning. I know social media is something that a lot of us work on. If you're a small business owner, you may do all of it yourself. And kudos to you because we know it's a lot of hard work. But what's important to think about is making sure that you plan ahead, is you don't want to have any unintended mistakes if you can possibly help it. Now, no one's perfect, right? We're going to make mistakes. It's usually not, if something bad happens in terms of an issue an organization might have or a person may have, it's when, and just being kind of prepared for that, right? But of course, like looking through any blind spots. So, planning ahead is hiring a pro. Get a pro to at least advise you. If they're not managing your social or writing your content or developing your visuals, your photos and video, I understand, right? Not all budgets can sustain that, but at least have a lifeline, at least to a colleague, to say, hey, I'm not sure about this. Could you just take a look at this copy real quick? Or I'm thinking of this approach. What do you think? But if you can, I think more and more we're understanding that the investing in a social media and public relations professional to advise, review, or maybe manage these channels are really, really helpful because they have a life of their own in some ways. Because people can self publish, sometimes they're self broadcasting, and it can get kind of crazy, right? If you don't have some kind of policy or guidelines, that's really important to do. There's a bunch of templates, I'm sure, if you search it online, good ones to just start working off of. Of course, you can hire a pro to set up custom policies and guidelines, but just how what is our style guide for our organization? So if you're a social media manager turns over or you hire another agency, whatever that is, you can say, here's our tone, here's our voice, here's our brand colors, here's the logos, here's our do's and don'ts and how we refer to clients or customers, right? Like give me the mandatories and keep that consistent so that no matter who's handling the channel, it doesn't feel different for people really. And then the guidelines and policies around how we are to use social media in the workplace, how you can and cannot talk about the organization, and that really everyone's personal use, like you have the right to say whatever you want. That doesn't mean it won't have implications for you, right? So whether you're a top leader or just, like me, an everyday kind of person, it's gonna matter. And just I'm not saying that that's right, right? But I'm saying it's real, and then we should understand that. And employees should understand that because not everyone's taught that, right? Planning your social media calendar, what you're going to say and what it's going to look like just across departments. That's that idea of diversifying, and diversity is, you should have case managers involved in how you're talking about, the kids that you serve, in your youth organization, for example, right? Or, the chef might have some input or good ideas or new recipe, or there's something novel coming in, or a huge supply of like, you know, millions of tortillas, and then you can get some cool video from that, right? There's all kinds of ideas across your departments and teams. We definitely want to create and proactively, like on purpose, ahead of time, at least a week at a time, if times are tough, your content, so that there's a little bit of scheduling that can be done, and there could be some second set of eyes review, right? In a standard employee kind of relationship, at least maybe a supervisor can kind of sign off, and everyone, got to um, review the copy beforehand before it goes live. Prepare standard responses. Most organizations have commonly asked questions that even a bot on Facebook could help answer for you. But always have a human ready to go 24/7. Socials 24/7. You can't really say, well, I scheduled it and we're done and no one's going to look at it. Someone has to be available. You never know when something can happen or when something really great can happen in a good relationship or, can be established. Use posting and monitoring tools when you can. Even Facebook has its own schedule ahead tool. But things like Hootsuite or Sprout Social usually has either a free component or a lower tier component in terms of cost. Be prepared to pause your social content. Sometimes when things happen, like on last summer, Black Tuesday, for a lot of organizations seemed to kind of come out of nowhere and they weren't sure what to happen. And it's okay to stop your content, assess the situation, do some research, come up with your response or your strategy moving forward, and then push play. Like no one's gonna like really miss, your advertisement for that cheese. Like it's fine. It's better not to be tone deaf and give some space for something that may come out that has something to do with systemic racism or social injustice or something big is happening and you're still trying to go as usual. Like, right, these are unusual times and we need to make sure we're nimble with it. Always, always. As a PR pro, I have to tell you people first, right? Win-win relationships. We just want to do, or I should do this. Substance are better than trends, right? Quality versus quantity. Like you don't need to pepper me all day and they're kind of blasé. You're going to lose your followers anyway in terms of social. Like just make it mean something. This is I mean, it's funny, but funny like ironic, right? Kind of tweet I saw going around all over Twitter. It was a hashtag fail from December 2020 issue of Giants Food in-house publication. So, I mean, even employees, like, and again, that goes back to your policies and guidelines, right? Because your employees like should call you in, not call you out, right? Say, hey, I'm not so sure about this. This feels a little tone deaf or this feels off to me. Like maybe we shouldn't have an advertisement that says like plan a super spread, like when we're talking about, because that could mean like super spreaders and COVID, and we don't really want people gathering. So we need to think about that, right? Um, just that second set of eyes could make all the difference. So making sure that you have multiple people reviewing things and then talking to your employees about, hey, if we make a mistake, we're humans. Things are happening fast. Like, let us know. We'll take care of it, right? You don't need to go out and externalize a problem if we can handle it in house and do the right thing. This gets off. Here's a good strategy in terms of because I get asked this often of, well, Melissa, there's a lot happening out there. I see some brands and organizations taking a stand on some issues. I see others not. Some get called out for saying something. Some get called out for not saying something. Like, what do we do? And I'm like, well, it goes back to understanding clearly who you are, who you serve, and how they engage with you. What has been your pattern of engagement and what should they expect in terms of your culture, right? So, so remembering that first and foremost, and then doing some research and thinking through these areas. So knowing that public companies and organizations, they have different rules. There's different rules around disclosure, what you should say, have to disclose, have to say, and what you don't, the autonomy that they have with and without those different boundaries, right, are going to be important to first acknowledge and understand. When something has a very, like that proximity criteria, when it hits very close to home, like that is an issue that directly affects your customers, it directly affects those you serve, your employees, your city. And this isn't just about some of the issues we saw in 2020, just in general. Like, even if you're thinking about a tragedy, a forest fire, something that happens in Australia may not, seem like the right fit for an organization that has nothing to do with that on the other side of the world, but may make a ton of sense to make a remark about when you take care of animals or your zoo, for example, right? Um, just a simple analogy there. But if it's in alignment with your brand pillars that you're known to be, for this cause, you donate money towards this cause, you help people of this nature, for example, that might be a time to say something. Part of your culture and the fabric within. I always tell organizations to make sure, like, you want to make sure you're doing the right things before you say something. Again, actions before the words. Because if what's under your hood is really messy, like, people will say something about it, right? The best case scenario is when they feel that there's an openness that they can actually tell you, right, in person to person, hey, top leader, I think that this is something that I've seen this conversation or this issue being talked about nationally or regionally or locally, and how does that impact us, and is there something we can do? But having that conversation is really healthy. If it's not quite there and you're the communicator and they're, you're being pushed to put something out, say, is there anything we can do to help with that within, or maybe there's a scholarship we can give to, something we can help right the boat a little bit, would make it feel a little more of a genuine message, would be helpful and something to consider, right? So yeah, if you're willing to make things right, not just say something, because then some of the cancel kind of culture I've seen around that is that, well, you're just appropriating this issue, right? You're not really part of the solution, right? And when it's proactive and thought about, you don't want to middle of the night figure that out on your phone and toss it out into the world, thinking, well, I did something, check the box, move on. Because even a typo in a statement like this can turn it all around, right? Um, and I noticed a lot lately that Dolly Parton, man, she's back out there. She's, I think she just celebrated her 75th ish birthday, and she's really made a resurgence in popularity, and she's really never gone away. She's kind of an evergreen brand, and part of that is, she'll say, is because her culture and her brand pillars have been about entertaining everyone. If your target market is to keep everyone happy, then you may not want to get into more of the polarizing conversations, right? As a PR person on my social channels, like, there are things that I care about, and you can probably see, like, there's core values like education and girls and whatnot, but I'm never divisive about it. So I won't man hate because I want to empower women, right? For example, I'm very careful. And Dolly Parton, she just said, hey, I learned, like, I'm an entertainer. That's my core value. And so I have to keep these parts of me, separate. But you also know that she takes a stand and she helps out in terms of literacy, has a personal, family connection. Her father couldn't read, so she has her nonprofit that helps with literacy, and then she's put money against COVID vaccines, right? So instead of railing against all the challenges you've seen in rollout, for example, she's like, here's money to help make it better. And then just some final reminders around these conversations and ideas is, let's plan with the idea of, this is a restoration year, this is a rehab year. It's going to be painful. It's not going to be, we're not instantly healed with the change of the calendar, as we all have seen and know. But it's about improving, what good things came out or how we developed last year, right? Let's improve upon these learnings. Be compassionate, be flexible, communicate with all the stakeholders via the channels they use, right? Not because it's most comfortable for us, but because we've listened to them and know that they get their communication in email, right? So we've got to keep that up, or they need phone calls. So we got to keep that up. Maintaining a consistent story using the peso model will help those who are really in the communication world and the industry, thinking we have to have some kind of paid budget. Even if it's $5 every super important, social media post, there has to be some kind of acknowledgement of, you will have to spend money to be seen and sometimes to be heard, right? Proactively, so on purpose, thoughtfully managing social media, get a team approach. However, even if that's a team of two, even, an intern as a second set of eyes, I would never give, an intern the keys, right, to drive the social media vehicles, because that's a lot of responsibility. But just, even for typos, that can be helpful, right? Second set of eyes. Create that hybrid engagement experiences as you can for your employees, for your volunteers, for your everyone you care about, right? See if you can bridge that gap a little bit. Help wherever, however you can throughout this really, really tough year. I think that's really going to be very well appreciated by the community. Measure how effective all your efforts are being, and then just keep monitoring the situation, the reactions to the work you're doing. That's part of your measurement, right? And asking the questions, getting the buy-in, surveying, interviewing your stakeholders, and then learn. Just we have to keep learning from each other, from our colleagues, from all the wonderful tools out there, but focus on that substance, because this is going to be definitely like a long haul, and definitely, and sometimes it's going to be just a baby stepping through a day, but doing the right little things so that the next day is a little bit better. Wonderful. So yeah, Leslie, any special comments or questions? I'd love to take any questions.
Are there any questions at this time? I'll just say that I came into this position as programs director in October, and I truly believe in what you were saying about not talking to people, right? Or telling them what they want, you think they want to hear, but engaging them, engaging your stakeholders. And so we'll be releasing a survey, just to assess the needs of the community and really basing our programming on those needs, as directed by our clientele, by the community, versus us thinking we know what you need, and developing programs without that input. So I have some comments and questions. I have a question from Brandy Whitesell. She says, first of all, this was wonderful. What tools do you use to measure impact and effectiveness?
Yeah, no, that's a solid question. And I almost said, oh my gosh, in my head, when I said measure your effectiveness, I thought, oh, that's a whole nother presentation, right? Brandy, hi, thanks for coming. What I would say is it depends on what your goals were, or those key performance indicators, right? Those KPIs we talk about. So every organization, when you develop a communication plan, you want to figure out like what really matters here. What is the needle that I need to move? That at the end of the day, you will say this was successful effort. So sometimes for an initiative that could really just be, uh, media coverage, and that's pretty tactical in a PR pros world. But what I would say is there are tools to measure, and monitor broadcast airwaves. So if you have something big coming, a tool like AirCheck, they're local here in San Antonio, but there's other vendors like TVI's, for example, as the competitor out of market, that scrape and record all the TV and all the radio news. So sometimes when you send out a press release, or you have a quick announcement you send out there, you don't know media covered because they don't have time to go back and say, "Hey, Brandy, thanks so much. We're going to cover this at 5 o'clock." Sometimes they just do. And if you don't have that measurement tool on, and that's really important for you to know that you got that coverage, you won't know. So sometimes I recommend investment in tools like that. Of course, you have your analytics tools on most of the social media platforms, as well as Hootsuite and Sprout Social. The Google Analytics on the back end, tying that to, it's a free tool, but tying that to the back end of your website. So if you say we really need to increase online donations, well, if you don't have that tool set up, and you have a specific, I always say have a specific phone number or a unique URL for something unique you want to track, that's really easy. And so if it's a special volunteer sign up or donation page, you're able to see the activity there. Sometimes it's really hard when you do marketing and PR or advertising, and you're on that side of the house, and there's like a program side of the house or a sales side of the house. And you're like, I can do the effort and bring you that lead, but I can't convert that lead. Like that happens with the sales team, or that happens with the product team or the program team, right? But you can follow that traffic from your social media advertising. So any advertising you do is definitely going to come with that vendor is going to have some kind of tool to measure. Media relations, there's tools like AirCheck, as well as like a recap maker called Coverage Book I love to use, that can pull all the data of, how many unique users and viewers, and the publicity value, the advertising value. If you bought that ad, how much would that cost? So there's a lot of tricks like that, and I'm happy to, if anyone wants to contact me, I'm happy to kind of share those other tools with them. But it also depends on, like, if their goal is making sales, well, then you'll track that funnel, right? and if you brought leads to them, and then where those leads went and how that went. But that also means you have to work in tandem with your other departments. So it goes back to not just communicating all these things, but the actions and the operations of the organization have to be in alignment and part of that process.
Perfect. And we have one more question
Hmm.
from Alexis and James, who joined us via Facebook Live. Do you have any resources or books for people who are starting out in the PR marketing world?
Oh my gosh, that's like God just threw me a softball, and I'm like, no, I'm ready to go. Because you'll laugh, and this sounds so selfish, but it's not. This weekend, I literally was just like sitting here thinking, because there's a huge gap between you just graduated and you get in the field, and that is for most industries. But I wrote an outline of what would that kind of book be to gap that starting out. But I do have some articles on my blog about, views from like what my apprentice learned, for advice for new grads. And, I have a lot of industry tips, and kind of hacks and advice from there. There's one book, and it's a textbook, but that's the point, is that there's not really, good concise books from pros in the industry. But there's a textbook called Effective Public Relations. And if you email me or message me on one of my social media platforms, I'm happy to send you that link to that book. And gosh, if you read that from front to back, you'd be set. Even the information like criterias of what's newsworthy, that's the kind of information that's in it. But we don't think about grabbing a textbook, right? Once we're out in the field. But I do want to do more training for pros, because it's really important. We can't learn enough from each other.
Yeah, continuing that education, so
Oh,
important.
yeah.
So I
Yes.
want to thank you all for joining us for our webinar this afternoon. I want to encourage you, just building on what Melissa said, if you are interested in helping, we can use maestros and maestras, and to come and speak on our webinars, to come and mentor some of our small business entrepreneurs, and really help build our community. We're hurting in 2021, but this is the year we are going to reignite San Antonio. So you can also join us at Buy Local Grow SA. We have a lot of free resources that we can connect you with and procurement opportunities. And I encourage you to check out Maestro Entrepreneur Center at our Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and our website. And if you liked what you see and you want to continue seeing this kind of programming, please donate to our cause and help in any way you can. And I hope to see you at our next one. Melissa, thank you so much for joining us. This was amazing. I knew you were going to be amazing. My
I'm
first
like, I need to take a picture. Y'all smile.
time. Let's do it.
Okay.
Thank you all. Have a great rest of your week.
Thank you all so much for being here. I appreciate it. Take care.